My motivation to work for the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom came from my commitment to both social justice and feminism. Ever since I was a teenager, I've been involved in anti-war and anti-prison activism, and at university I studied peace and conflict. I wanted to understand systems and structures of power and violence, as well as resistance to them. When I started with WILP, I felt like I'd found a home to grow my analysis and my activism. Its history and its current work are about bringing feminists from around the world together to challenge patriarchy, racism, militarism, and capitalism, and to work for peace by promoting alternative visions of security and different ways to care for each other and for our planet. My work on nuclear weapons is a big part of this imagining and pursuit of a different future. I see nuclear weapons as one of the most extreme expressions of violence and control of the patriarchal, racist, militarized, and capitalist world order. These weapons are part of the spectrum of institutionalized violence, along with settler colonialism, police and prisons, borders, and war, to name just a few. Even without being launched, nuclear weapons are used to project the power and invincibility of their possessor. They're the pinnacle of a state's monopoly on violence, the ultimate signifier of domination. In addition, we can't lose sight of the fact that these weapons can manifest the most violence in a single moment. Patriarchal and racist structures shape every aspect of the nuclear order. Those who possess or desire nuclear weapons argue that the mere possession of the bomb prevents conflict and deters attack. They insist on talking about nuclear weapons in the abstract as magical tools that keep us safe and maintain stability in the world. This abstraction of nuclear weapons into instruments of politics and power is an exercise in patriarchal discourse, employing techniques like gaslighting, victim blaming, denial of lived experience, and gendered assertions about credibility and rationality that prevent alternative perspectives from being taken seriously. Patriarchal approaches to power and strength also make disarmament out to be something that makes one weak. By holding nuclear weapons up as necessary for security and stability, and as a projection of the state's power and invincibility, it constructs a world in which those with nuclear weapons will never give them up. This creates obstacles to disarmament because by projecting these weapons as something that only certain special countries can have or can be trusted with, it makes them desirable objects. But they're not desirable. They are in reality horrific weapons that turn cities into ash, that turn human beings and animals into shadows. And this is where racism and white supremacy play a key role in upholding the nuclear order. The lived experiences of those who have been bombed with nuclear weapons in Japan in 1945 and in the thousands of nuclear weapon tests conducted around the world have by and large been people of color. The United States conducted over 1,000 nuclear weapon tests, including at the Nevada test site, which is on indigenous lands. The Western Shoshone are known as the most bombed nation on Earth. The US, the UK, and France have also tested nuclear weapons on and near Pacific Island nations. The British tested it on indigenous lands in Australia. France tested it in Algeria, etc. The history of nuclear weapon testing is a history of colonialism. The legacy of these acts of radioactive racism are still being felt today. Yet those with this lived experience of the bomb are not considered credible. They might be asked to give a survivor statement now and then, but the mostly white men in suits talking about nuclear weapons don't take them seriously. A gender-sensitive and race-sensitive approach to nuclear weapons means that we need to expand who is participating in conversations and negotiations and debates about nuclear weapons, and also what perspectives are treated as credible and legitimate. Diversity is crucial, but it has to be accompanied by a critical examination of why and how the dominant narratives of nuclear weapons have persisted, despite the fact that they are myths. They're theories generated by certain people who benefit in very specific ways from the perpetuation of nuclear weapons and the massive violence that they entail. I do have hope for change, that a more equal world that is free from nuclear weapons is possible. This moment of reckoning right now in the United States around race and equality and safety, the movements to defund police and abolish prisons, to push back against the egregious assaults against migrants and asylum seekers, and to address the colonial violence and enslavement of people that are at the founding of this country, all of this is being confronted right now on city streets. And amidst the brutality that we see from the police and the white supremacists, we can also see hope that the myths and narratives of the state are being challenged, are being undone in new ways, and that the ideas of activists, particularly Black feminists and other Black, Indigenous, and activists of color, have been working on for years, these ideas are gaining new traction and finding mainstream voice. This is what needs to happen with nuclear weapons. And we can only hope that it does not take a catastrophically violent incident for it to happen. Or, as in the case of Black Lives Matter, violence and brutality over and over and over again. Instead, the reckoning around nuclear weapons should and can happen as part of these larger confrontations around race and white supremacy, around violence and repression, around what we're spending money on. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, we need to remember that the United States has more nuclear warheads than it does hospitals, that it is spending and planning to spend around $50 billion a year on nuclear bombs while unemployment is skyrocketing and millions of people don't have affordable access to healthcare. Without drawing away from the struggles for social justice going on right now, we can see that nuclear weapons are part of the system of injustice and must be done away with as we build communities of care and equality.